After a long and thorough deep dive into the new episode, I can finally say I've put together a mind-blowing episode 5 theory, and today we're going to connect every single dot from what we've learned so far and break down all the events that went down in episode 5 without missing a single detail. But to make sure we don't overlook anything, we first need to talk about Jax's biggest secret, the one he's been hiding all the way up until episode 5. Episode 5 just dropped a major bombshell about Jax, and now we can finally say we know his biggest secret, the one that pretty much explains everything he's ever done or said throughout the entire run of the amazing digital circus. How did it all go down, and what do Gangle and Pomni have to do with it? First, let's go back to that emotional stargazing scene where Jax actually opened up to Pomni, at least for a moment until Regatha showed up and everything shifted.
I didn't think you cared about what other people like.
No, yeah, you're right. I don't.
Do you have any actual friends? Not anymore.
That's when we found out, for the first time, that Jax actually used to have a best friend, the one briefly shown during the intermission. And based on their placement right next to Kaufmo, yeah, let's be real, it's pretty obvious. That friend was turned into an abstracted monster a long time ago, and if you think back to the very first moments of the pilot, we already saw Jax in the form fans grew to love. Blunt, kinda rude, but with that weird charm that made him oddly likable, no matter what awful stuff he said or did. Which means one thing, that character, his old friend, disappeared from the digital circus a long time ago, and it's hard to believe that Jax was always like this.
They broke my comedy mask.
So, Kane, we having a new adventure today for the newbie or what?
And what's super important to point out is that even though a lot of time has passed, this whole topic is still completely off limits, like it's the one thing you absolutely don't bring up around Jax. But Regatha crossed that line, and you can literally see Jax's face change the second she does. Raggy immediately starts apologizing like crazy, clearly realizing she messed up. After that, Pomni tries a few times to dig a little deeper and get some details, but Jax smoothly dodges every single question.
What was that about?
It's nothing. Who cares? Doesn't she get on your nerves sometimes?
So, you wanna talk about that?
I'm in a maid outfit. What do you think?
This is just the backstory to this video, because losing a close friend may have been the spark, but it definitely wasn't the full reason behind Jax's weird, borderline schizophrenic behavior. But what if Jax was always like this? I mean, I could agree with that, but the problem is, we don't actually know what any of these characters were like before we first saw them, so we can only go off the tiny hints the devs have dropped. And I think I found one of those hints in the evil clones of our favorite characters. Take Regatha, for example. If you look at her evil version, then compare it to the real Regatha, they're actually kind of similar. Even before episode 5 dropped, there was a theory floating around that these evil versions are a reflection of the characters' true selves. Like, their real emotions and thoughts they've been hiding behind masks. And if we run with that theory, then Jax was either originally just a quiet, maybe even kind-hearted guy who changed after losing his friend. Or more likely, he's been hiding how he really feels this whole time, and I'm definitely leaning toward that second option, and I'm about to explain why. But first, let's rewind to 1 year ago and take a look at a very specific scene.
We like to have a little funeral service to remember the people who abstract.
We clearly see Jax walking away from Kaufmo's funeral, and at first a lot of people didn't get why the rabbit would act like that, at least not until this moment. If you look closely, you'll notice he actually looks genuinely sad at first, but then there's this flash of bitterness on his face before he storms out of frame. And now, it's obvious. That wasn't some disrespectful move or anything like that. It was plain and simple fear. Fear of feeling those emotions again. Most likely, he ran off, not because he was scared of the funeral itself, but because that one moment instantly brought back the memory of that character. And now, imagine Jax living every single day with real pain, the kind that doesn't fade over time. Like I said before, even mentioning the whole situation only makes things worse for him. And if you look back at pretty much any scene with Jax, they all kind of show the same thing. But for some reason, the one that stuck with me the most was that scene from episode 2.
Maybe when we catch up to them, we could...
Be assertive. Like this!
Hey! Jax!
Or take this moment from episode 5.
I'm a New Zealand extremist, and I don't know what New Zealanders threaten people with.
You've got it exactly right. In every one of these scenes, Jax is basically pushing everyone and everything away. And now, here's where it gets really interesting. Like we already figured out, Jax wasn't always such a jerk. All this started happening right after that loss. But the problem was, he didn't really want to share his feelings with anyone, and on the flip side, no one else really tried to understand him either. Over time, that just built up, turning Jax into someone totally unfriendly toward everyone in the digital circus, at least until Pomni showed up. Now you might argue that in the early episodes, Jax was literally roasting her. And you'd be right, but everything changed because of just one scene in episode 4.
How you doing?
Everything's been... I'm doing fine.
Wish I could say the same.
Jax, there's dishes back here. You got time to lean, you got time to clean.
God. I'm on it. Later, Pomni.
After all the, let's say, horrors that Gangle put Jax through, something just clicked inside him, and for the first time, this dude actually approached a conversation calmly and rationally. And Pomni's reaction said more than 1,000 words. She was genuinely surprised because she'd always seen Jax as that classic troublemaker you just don't want to deal with. But here he was, a level-headed character she could actually have a real talk with. It was like in that moment, Jax realized he couldn't keep going like this and felt something inside him. A feeling that Pomni might be the one to pull him out of the swamp that he and his so-called environment had trapped him in. If you think about it, these two characters actually have a lot in common, and the fact that their conversation during stargazing went so well says a lot. By the way, that's exactly when Pomni realized Jax was a genuinely sane person you could talk to about anything, and judging by that final scene, they definitely found common ground. Too bad for Ragatha in this situation, but we'll definitely get to her later. Now you've got a clear picture of what Jax felt, what he went through, and how he ended up like this, and it's time to reveal a pretty big secret. After all, everyone knows that Jax, let's say, doesn't hold back when it comes to anyone.
You don't want to mess with the new AI, Zuby?
Yeah, no.
So what was it like being stuck with the nutcase?
It wasn't that bad, actually.
Hey, take it easy.
Oh, take it easy, that's you.
But for some reason, Gangle became Jax's #1 target, and I've got a few theories about why. First off, Jax might see a reflection of his lost friend in Gangle. We don't really know what kind of jokes or banter they had between them, but maybe they used to mess with each other a lot. After the loss, and considering everything I've already told you, Jax's sense of humor and ability to be reasonable probably got twisted, and eventually it all escalated into what we're seeing now.
Ah, just like Mom used to make.
Which door should we choose?
Not sure. Let's try this out.
Aww.
Or maybe during one of the past adventures, Gangle did something similar to what she did to Jax in episode 4, and that's what eventually led his friend to become an abstracted monster, and now Jax is just getting revenge on her in his own twisted way. Either way, I'm more than sure that Gangle is somehow connected to that character. Maybe after that whole incident, she became the quiet, closed-off person we know now. Of course, this is all just theory. No one knows for sure, but considering we now understand that deep down Jax is actually a good guy, then yeah, his so-called obsession with Gangle definitely didn't come out of nowhere. And now let's take a closer look at how Jax interacts with Pomni.
Also, she's dumb and she looks weird.
Think we all look weird.
Excuse you, this is what peak male performance looks like. My ears and tail are kind of the pinnacle of masculinity.
You don't have a tail.
What are you talking about? Yes, I do. It's what the? Where's my tail? How long have I not had my tail?
I have never seen you with a tail.
When would that?
I kind of liked the low stakes ones.
I thought the first two were awesome. The rest, eh. Oh yeah, Pomni. I can show you that thing in the hall I was talking about.
Oh yeah, sure.
But what if it's not Gangle who reminds Jax of his old friend? What if it's actually Pomni? And what if all those so-called insults and teasing were really just his way of testing her, trying to see how much she resembles that person? That would explain why, out of everyone in the digital circus, Pomni's the only one Jax genuinely wants to talk to now. Maybe he's finally trying to break free from the chains and fears that have been holding him back from being his real self. And I'm pretty sure episode 6 is only going to dive deeper into this storyline and reveal way more than we know right now. Right now, Jax is just an insecure character doing everything he can to hide his true self behind this tough guy act. But does he really need to keep doing that? That's pretty much the heart of Jax's biggest secret, one that's tangled up in all kinds of misunderstandings and hidden emotions. Still, by doing what he did, Jax finally took a step in the right direction, and I truly believe he can lay that secret to rest. Episode 5 revealed one of the biggest mysteries yet, and of course I'm talking about that one conversation where Ragatha casually mentioned someone Jax used to call a friend. And it's more than obvious that this friend, or honestly his only and closest friend, is none other than Ribbit, who appeared on screen for just a few seconds. But that was enough to tell us everything we needed to know. So today we're diving into what really happened to Ribbit. Why is this such a taboo subject for Jax? How is Pomni involved in all of this? What's coming next? And of course, we're going to talk about whether Ribbit could actually return, maybe not as a regular character like Zooble or Jax, but possibly in the form of an NPC, though some clues suggest we might just see Ribbit climb back out of the basement after all. Let's start at the tip of the iceberg, and right away it becomes clear that Ribbit is a frog. We also got official confirmation that Ribbit was the character who turned into an abstracted monster right before the same thing happened to Kaufmo. And if you think back to that early scene we mentioned at the start of this video, you'll realize just how painful this still is for Jax. Which honestly feels strange, because we're so used to seeing Jax as this unshakable, sarcastic guy like nothing could ever really break him. But this hit different. Even after warming up to Pomni and forming what looked like a genuine friendship, Jax still can't bring himself to talk about the one thing that clearly hurts him most.
What was that about?
It's nothing. Who cares? Doesn't she get on your nerves sometimes?
So, you wanna talk about that?
I'm in a maid outfit. What do you think?
All of that was the foundation of what we know about Ribbit. Now let's dig a little deeper. The sudden bond between Pomni and Jax always felt kinda weird to me, especially since Jax was cold and honestly straight up rude to her throughout the first 3 episodes. Then out of nowhere, it's like a switch flipped, and he turned into this chill, actually likable guy that Pomni genuinely seems to enjoy talking to. And if you dig a little further, you'll remember an old concept that reveals Pomni was originally supposed to be a frog, just like Ribbit. I'm more than convinced all of this is connected, and Pomni is already destined to become Jax's new best and probably only friend. But why did Jax even choose Ribbit as his friend in the first place? There are a few theories, but my favorite is the animal theory. If you think about it for like half a second, it lines up. Jax and Ribbit are both animals, okay? Sure, Ribbit's technically an amphibian, but you get what I mean. Maybe that's what drew Jax to him, or maybe it was the other way around, and that simple detail is what sparked their entire friendship. For a lot of people, the number one question is, what actually happened to Ribbit? And that's where things get really interesting, because there are a few theories out there, and I'm going to walk you through all of them before telling you which one I personally believe the most. Theory 1 says it was all Gangle's fault.
What? Bro, what are you talking about, man?
But if we're being serious, then yeah. Even though Gangle comes off as this sensitive and fragile character at first glance, Episode 4 made it very clear that if something doesn't go her way, the fallout can be brutal. So what if Ribbit was actually the first one to go through something similar to what Jax experienced in Episode 4?
Nobody can see this, right?
It's time for your employee reevaluation.
What if after that Ribbit's mental state just couldn't recover, and day by day, he slowly started losing his mind, eventually turning into the creature we saw? There's even evidence that Jax wasn't always the jerk we know now, but I'll save that for tomorrow because the video you're gonna see will completely flip your entire understanding of the digital circus. No spoilers just yet. Anyway, after Ribbit turned into that monster and got sent to the basement, that's when Jax started becoming the guy who mocks, humiliates, and throws sharp jokes at everyone around him. And have you ever wondered why Gangle became his #1 target?
I'm a New Zealand extremist, and I don't know what New Zealanders threaten people with. Which door should we choose?
Not sure. Let's try this out.
That's just one theory, and the real issue is we don't actually know what Ribbit was like, and that's exactly where Pomni comes in. Remember when I said Pomni and Ribbit are connected if only because they were both meant to be frogs? I'm not sure if the show will ever tie them together directly as characters, but when it comes to personality and behavior, they might be way more alike than we think. That could be the very reason why after all this time Jax chose Pomni as his new partner in crime, because deep down, he sees a reflection of his old friend in her. So now we kind of know what Ribbit was like before turning into an abstracted monster. Maybe a little shy, kind, probably treated others well, and definitely had a strong friendship with Jax. At least that's how we see Pomni now. But let's shift away from that sweet version of Pomni for a sec, and think about her evil version, who, let's be honest, might actually make a great match for Jax.
Ha! Get owned!
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
She's cool.
So here's a theory: those evil versions are actually reflections of the character's true feelings, thoughts, and behaviors. That means Pomni might not be as sweet as she seems at first glance. I'm not saying she's some villain out to hurt everyone, but there's definitely a rebellious streak in her, and chances are Ribbit had that same spark. That's probably the very thread that kept Jax and Ribbit tight as best friends. But even if we imagine Jax was originally a friendly guy, that spark was always there. And that spark, maybe from an awkward word or too many jokes and teasing between them and others, or even judgment from the rest of the cast, could have pushed Ribbit into depression. That might have eventually led him down to that basement as an abstracted monster. After that, Jax probably hid, or maybe even lost his friendly side, leaving just that spark behind, which now helps him mask his true feelings, while he simultaneously takes shots at Gangle. Which theory makes more sense to you? Or maybe you've got your own ideas. Drop them in the comments, I'd really enjoy reading them. Personally, I'm leaning toward the second theory because it explains why Jax shut everyone out and made the whole Ribbit topic off limits. No one even dares mention Ribbit around him. After all, Jax is the reason his best friend is gone. Maybe he blames himself every single day, and I'm pretty sure the new episode will reveal a lot more about this. There's even another scene with Jax that backs up this theory.
Do you think Gangle is actually capable of being happy?
What?
I don't know, like her comedy mask still breaks every day. Does she think hanging out with Zubul is gonna magically fix that?
Maybe she just doesn't want to hang out with someone who's mean to her all the time.
Aren't you surprised that Jax actually cares about Gangle? It seems wild considering everything we've seen, but there's a reason behind it, and that reason is Ribbit. I'm pretty sure Jax sees in Gangle's constant gloomy state a reflection of the same feelings Ribbit had in his last days in the digital circus, and that's what triggers Jax. Even though he loves to joke and mess with her, deep down he's scared of any repeat of what happened with the abstraction. That's exactly why he left Kufmo's funeral early and went to visit his best friend's room afterward. Now you know pretty much everything that happened with Ribbit and partly with Jax up to this point, but what's really exciting is what comes next. I'm almost 100% sure episode 6 will reveal a lot more about the relationship between these two characters. But first let's dive into a pretty spicy topic. Could Ribbit actually make a comeback in the amazing digital circus? Right now, we know for sure that Ribbit's hanging out somewhere in the basement with Kofmo and the other unlucky souls. We also remember that turning into an abstracted monster involves a major personality shift, and for a long time, most fans believed there was no way back, since Kane seemed capable of everything except possessing the minds of characters. But let's not forget this moment.
Give me a whiskey sour, but hold the egg white, since I'm a vegan. What? I hate this! How is this even possible? I thought Kane couldn't...
Or even this scene from episode 4. We clearly see that Kane can possess characters' minds, changing their thoughts, feelings, behavior, even habits. So what's stopping him from pulling Ribbit out of the basement, taking over his mind, wiping away all the damage, and basically bringing him back to a normal life? Honestly, nothing's stopping Kane from doing that. But as we know, the digital circus is a closed loop where new faces have to appear and the cast is limited to just 6 characters, so it's unlikely Ribbit will return as a full resident. That said, no one says he can't show up as an NPC, which seems totally possible given how important this character has become. Or maybe he's already here. Did it strike anyone as odd that in episode 5 we started seeing this mannequin more and more often? And considering that this mannequin showed up all the way back in the very first teaser for episode 5, yet never actually appeared in the episode itself, there's a good chance that was a hidden hint from the creators. We've also come to understand who Ribbit really is, and how important he might be for the future of the story. So what if Kane, instead of sending him to the basement like the others, decided to spare him and move his consciousness back into its original form? What if Ribbit's been right there with us this whole time? Honestly, this whole idea got me hooked, so I dove deep and tried to find answers to everything. Hopefully, I actually did. A lot of people notice that Regatha's mental state just keeps getting worse, and yeah, she's really on the edge of falling into straight-up depression, but barely anyone actually figured out the real reason why. If you think it's just cause of Pomni or Jax, then you're way off. And today, I'm gonna prove that to you. First off, let's remember what Regatha was like back in the early episodes. She was kind helpful, always keeping it positive, but even then there was something off about her that most folks just didn't catch. Slowly but surely, she started changing from one of the most upbeat characters to this insecure girl who's clearly spiraling and standing on the edge of becoming an abstracted monster. And like I said, the real reason behind all this ain't as obvious as it seems. Of course, episode 5 gave us the most info about her, and even though Goose said it was going to be equally split between Jax and Regatha, turns out her first leak was way more accurate, because we honestly learned way more about Raggy, while we still don't know much about Jax. So here's the thing: to start untangling this whole mess, we gotta go back to one of the most talked about scenes in episode 5.
Maybe she just doesn't want to hang out with someone who's mean to her all the time.
She likes when I'm mean to her, though.
I didn't think you cared about what other people like.
No, yeah, you're right. I don't.
Do you have any actual friends?
Not anymore. Oh, wait, no. I'm sorry. I wasn't talking about...
Pay close attention to how Regatha acts the moment she walks in. At first, she's totally confident, like she's about to shut Jax down again for acting out like she always does. But then just a few seconds later, we see her completely fall apart. She can't even put a sentence together and ends up running away from the problem she literally walked into herself. What really threw me off were the tears in her eyes, and that's where it gets weird. Is the topic of Ribbit really that painful for Jax that even Raggy picked up on it so hard that just a judgmental look from him hit her like a truck? That already tells us Jax means a hell of a lot more to Regatha than it seemed. Then we hit the intermission, which doesn't really matter all that much except for that one scene, but after that we jump to the bar, and that's where we hear a story that's not only real honest, but also kinda emotional.
I was born into a fairly wealthy family. We had a large property with horses and chickens, and my mother, my mother was a lot. I worked in real estate for a bit until I ended up here. I'm sure she doesn't miss me. I certainly don't miss the yelling, and berating, and guilt tripping.
I'm showing you these scenes in full so you don't miss a single detail, but right now, let's get to the real point. During her little monologue, Raggy opens up about a lot of personal stuff that finally starts connecting the dots for the main question of this whole video. We find out Regatha used to live on a farm and had a super strict mom who clearly raised her in this super conservative household, where Raggy was expected to be the perfect obedient daughter doing whatever her mom said without question. And of course, that messed her up real good and shaped the doll we see now. And trust me, I'll prove all of it with actual examples. We also found out Regatha worked at a real estate agency, which honestly threw me off a bit, cause based on what we know, she grew up on this big fancy farm with a rich family. So it didn't really make sense why she'd end up in real estate at all. But that's where we start seeing the roots of Regatha's mental struggles. She was clearly trying hard to prove to her mom that she could handle life on her own. And remember what she said? That her mom doesn't care where she is or what's happening to her. So most likely Raggy got into real estate hoping it'd finally get her mom's attention. And that thread keeps popping up through the whole series, and trust me, I'll show you how it all connects a bit later. We also found out in episode 5 that Jax is scared of corn, because it reminds him of the farm, and I already talked about the theory that Jax and Regatha are siblings. And yeah, even with all the solid points I made, a lot of people still don't buy it. Everyone's got their own opinion, and I totally respect that, so I won't push this theory as the only explanation for their connection. But I do think it's super clear these two were definitely connected in the real world somehow. Maybe Jax worked on that very same farm Regatha lived on or something like that. Either way, they for sure knew each other before the digital circus, and that right there is one of the keys to understanding what's really going on with her. And here's where it gets good, cause to fully get what's happening in that scene, we gotta rewind just a bit. We're keeping in mind that Jax and Regatha knew each other before the digital circus, and it's totally possible that back in those early days, maybe even weeks or months, Jax was the closest person she had in there, and that's when Ribbit shows up. The same Ribbit who now chills somewhere deep in the basement, but back then he's the one who basically came between Jax and Raggy, and here's where it really starts heating up. Realizing she's got no one left, Regatha starts looking for real friends, and boom, that's when her upbringing and all that pressure from her super strict mom kicks in. She was raised to always be obedient and cheerful, and she tried to use that same vibe to connect with the other circus folks. But something clearly didn't click, because everyone could tell there was something off about her, and Gangle straight up says it in episode 4.
Like in regards to your issues. I'm sure Ragatha would like to help you out.
Oh, Ragatha. I love her, but after a while it gets kinda hard to tell how genuine she's actually being.
Actually, Jack said that himself.
Why are you always pretending everything's always fine? Like, if you tell someone they're loved and appreciated every day, it just kinda loses all meaning. It just feels like she's trying to take advantage of you, you know?
It's that fake sincerity and forced positivity that kept Ragatha from making any real friends, and that became her downfall because on one hand, she's used to doing exactly that to fit in, but on the other, she knows it pushes people away, and yet she can't do anything about it. And right at that moment, her mental state starts sliding down because her biggest problem isn't even the lack of real friends, but the lack of attention, which like we remember she desperately needed ever since her time working in the real estate agency. Several scenes from earlier episodes prove this.
'Cause she'd rather be with an NPC than with us or something. I wish someone would flirt with me.
But the clearest scene proving my point is the final scene in Mildenhall Manor, where Pomni appreciated her care.
Thanks for always being concerned about me. I feel like, through everything, I haven't really been appreciative enough about that.
Oh, thank you, Pomni. I just want to make sure you're doing all right. You know, we care about you.
You can see how happy she is that someone finally noticed her and praised her behavior. And here, we smoothly move to another important character in Ragatha's life, Pomni. As soon as our favorite jester landed in the digital circus, Raggy immediately started encouraging her, trying to get into her circle of trust and become good friends. That's why she was so obsessively following Pomni everywhere.
Oh, and don't worry about the whole abandoning me for the exit thing. It's perfectly understandable what you were going through at the time, and there's no hard feelings. You're all good. Well, sounds fun. What do you think, Pomni? Pomni! Are you okay? Well, what happened?
Yeah, I'm fine.
Or like here when she tried with all her might to protect her, to earn her respect, trust, and sincerity, and let's be honest, at some point she even succeeded. But then we saw those scenes with Gangle and Jax that made Pomni look at Raggy a little differently. And if at first Pomni even doubted the truth of those words, that bar scene changed a lot.
Hey, Pomni! Remember when Kaufmo smashed me against the walls and I got all jumbled up? All things considered, that was pretty funny, right?
No, not really.
Oh, yeah, no. Sorry, that was probably pretty traumatic for you.
That turned out to be a fatal mistake, because basically Ragatha tried to get Pomni's attention again with a not-so-great joke, which finally convinced Pomni that Raggy isn't really the sincere person you want to share everything with, but a mentally fragile person whose only goal is to do whatever it takes to get noticed. And Ragatha herself totally gets that. Right now she's literally losing her last hope for a genuine friendship, and if you remember how she used to treat Pomni always supporting her and stuff, now a lot has changed.
Okay, let's, calm down a bit.
What? You're the one who said it's fine to be a jerk sometimes! I'm sorry, Pomni. That wasn't very cool of me.
It's fine.
It's clear that at this moment, both Pomni and Ragatha herself realize that this is her true side, and everything before was just a lie. So Ragatha lost her last chance, and now we finally get to that scene where everyone leaves in groups while Raggy stands alone, and it's obvious, nobody cares about her. She's once again completely alone, and there's nothing left to do about it. So we get that the real reason behind Ragatha's mental decline that will probably lead to depression is a mix of factors that started back in her childhood. The main cause is complete indifference, not only from Pomni and Jax, but from everyone else too. The only thing Raggy can do to avoid repeating Kaufmo's fate is to become her true self, but sadly she probably doesn't know how to do that. And as usual, I'm waiting for your thoughts in the comments. What's really going on with Jax right now, and why is all of this only making him worse? Or maybe we finally got to see the real Jax. And trust me, this video is going to surprise you. It's just the beginning of a whole series where we fully break Jax down and show you every side of him. So by the end, you'll know exactly who he is. Episode 5 finally dropped, and it turned out to be pretty wild, especially when it comes to Jax. And today, I'm going to tell you why all this is happening to him, why almost everyone in the digital circus actually hates him deep down, and of course, what's coming next. It all started with that snarky joke about oh-so-positive Ragatha charm, but whatever. What really matters is what came next, because just a minute later we saw the adventure Jax ended up choosing.
Hi everyone! In today's episode of Poach Everything, I'm going to be hunting the critically endangered red ribbon rhinoceros. Just like Mom used to make. Oh my god! Delicious meat.
Right from the very first seconds, you're hit with that same vibe from the pilot or episode 2, where Jax came off as that slightly unhinged guy with a razor-sharp tongue. And honestly, nothing's really changed here, even though a lot of people thought that after Jax's final scenes in episode 4, he'd chill out a bit. But nope. This is actually just the beginning of a deep dive into his character in this new episode. Then we jump into a whole new adventure where Pomni becomes president, and once again, Jax totally steals the spotlight, just like he did in Poacher's Paradise.
Oi, mate! I'm an Australian extremist, and I've come to detonate this bomb that'll release all the world's deadliest spiders into... Did I pick a bad time?
And if you really pay attention to the next bit of dialogue,
Follow your heart.
You stay out of this! Shouldn't you be arrested or something?
Hey, I'm on your side here.
You're literally not.
Come on, just pick your favorite color.
Like the red one?
then it becomes pretty clear that Jax hasn't changed at all. He's still playing his usual twisted mind games with Pomni and deliberately trying to throw her off right when it matters most. I'm more than sure Jax gets a kick out of the whole thing, watching everyone scramble to stop him or calm him down. He couldn't care less about the consequences of what he's doing. He's just vibing off the chaos and the panic he causes. And of course, just like in the last adventure, and honestly, in pretty much every episode, it's Gangle who ends up suffering the most from his so-called jokes.
I'm a New Zealand extremist, and I don't know what New Zealanders threaten people with.
The next adventure really put Jax's hate for Gangle on full display. He didn't even try to play along. He straight up rejected the whole thing from the jump and immediately showed just how far he's willing to go.
Can you believe this, Pomni? First she draws anime, now she drags us all into one? She must be one of them, losers. This is boring. I vote we skip it.
Shut up, we're not skipping it.
Slice of life animes are the worst ones. It's embarrassing. I mean...
And up to this point, we're still seeing the same old Jax we're used to. Sarcastic, detached, and kinda cruel. But then stargazing hits, and suddenly everything starts to shift. That moment changes almost everything, because we get a glimpse of the possibility that maybe, just maybe, Jax isn't as heartless as we've always seen him.
Do you think Gangle is actually capable of being happy?
What?
I don't know, like her comedy mask still breaks every day. Does she think hanging out with Zubul is gonna magically fix that?
Maybe she just doesn't want to hang out with someone who's mean to her all the time.
She likes when I'm mean to her, though.
I didn't think you cared about what other people like.
No, yeah, you're right, I don't.
On one hand, it's easy to say that Jax is actually a good guy, that all the aggression, the teasing, the sharp jokes dripping with sarcasm are just a defense mechanism. I mean, we do see him genuinely worried about Gangle, and because of that, a lot of people probably thought Jax is actually a softie deep down. But when I watched it for the first time, something about that scene immediately felt off, and then the next bit of dialogue came in and completely exposed the truth.
Do you have any actual friends?
Not anymore. Oh, wait, no. I'm sorry. I wasn't talking about that. That wasn't meant to be.
Now we realize that Jax once had a best friend, maybe even his only real friend, and later, we actually got to see who that was. It's pretty clear now that this character eventually became what we know as Kaufmo, and suddenly, Jax's reaction during Kaufmo's funeral makes a whole lot more sense. He doesn't want to feel those same emotions again, the pain he went through after losing someone that close. But listen to what he says next.
What was that about?
It's nothing. Who cares? Doesn't she get on your nerves sometimes?
I mean, she's nice to everyone.
I don't know. I think she tries way too hard. Like, we're stuck in... Why are you always pretending everything's always fine? Like, if you tell someone they're loved and appreciated every day, it kind of loses all meaning. It just feels like she's trying to take advantage of you, you know? Also, she's dumb and she looks weird.
I think we all look weird.
Excuse you.
And at that moment, it really hits you. Jax is actually a pretty sane guy who sees the whole situation in the digital circus for what it is. And if his words don't seem to match up with his actions at first, just keep watching this video, it'll all start to make sense. What honestly caught me off guard was what he said about Ragatha and how Pomni reacted to it. Jax isn't putting on a mask or trying to manipulate anyone. He's just being 100% himself. Whatever he does, it's real. No lies, no fake kindness, just raw, unfiltered Jax. Meanwhile, Ragatha, who we all thought was Pomni's best friend this whole time, kind of takes a hit in our eyes after what Jax says. At this point, the viewer's left in a super weird headspace, because on one hand, we're watching Jax completely outdo himself in terms of being worse than ever before, like he's leveled up in cruelty compared to past episodes. But on the other hand, we're seeing a character who actually seems grounded. maybe even the only one who really understands what's going on around them. Then we're dropped into the bar. Yeah, the same one that was hyped up in the teaser with all that mafia energy, though barely any of that made it into the final version. But honestly, it doesn't even matter, cause just a few seconds after that deep emotional moment, boom, we're back to classic Jax.
Give me a whiskey sour, but hold the egg white, since I'm a vegan. What? I hate this! How is this even possible? I thought Kane couldn't...
I could have made it way worse for you.
Well, I'm calling a vote to turn Zubul into a slug.
Everyone voted against that.
Who hate it?
And at first it seems like nothing major happened. But then Jax remembers his, let's say, true purpose, and that's when we hear this conversation.
I like making drinks.
That sounds fitting for you.
I know there's an implication there, but I can't be to figure it out.
So, Pomni, you ever have any jobs? Or are you too young for that?
I'm 25 years old.
And then comes that story.
Thought you'd never ask. Well, after my lung cancer diagnosis, me and my junkie associate from a chemistry class I used to teach
Yeah, I
started...
figured. How about you, Gangle?
Hey, I wasn't done.
Followed by a healthy dose of Jax's classic sarcasm.
A bartender and a tattoo artist? You're killing me here, Zuby.
What do you mean when you say that? Do you have, like, an actual point, or are you just talking?
I'm just having fun. I forgot you hate...
So what do you think right now? Jax seems to be acting pretty normal, but there's still something off. Not quite how things should have been after that conversation. But to me, the next short bit of dialogue totally flips the whole storyline and the meaning of episode 5 in this video upside down.
Sorry about the whole president thing. I just thought it'd be funny.
Are you apologizing? What's happening?
Just ignore him.
Apology accepted, I guess.
Wow, the first steps of a budding friendship, right, Ragatha?
It's during this conversation that we realize Jax has developed some sort of interest in Pomni, and I'm talking strictly friendship here, just to clear that up. And again, we see how Ragatha reacts to this, but that's a whole other topic for another video. To me though, the softball scene really showed us Jax in full color. First off, it's obvious how much he despises his evil version, which, ironically, is basically his good version. There are theories that this evil Jax is actually the real one. And that makes sense, but I'll dive into that tomorrow. For now, let's get back to the softball game, because that's where we truly saw the real Jax. You can fake friendship or loyalty, but genuine anger? That's impossible to fake no matter how much you try.
What the heck? Who did this? You!
Jax, you're up to bat.
I quite look like this though!
Seems fitting for you, though. I figured you'd be into this.
What does that mean? What's that supposed to mean?
I'm just having fun. I forgot you hate fun.
I don't want to wear this!
I have never seen you this upset about something.
Jax, bat!
I'm gonna kill you when this is over.
Honestly, this scene proved to me that no matter what, Jax is still that same guy from the first episodes. Sure, we see him a bit differently now, but deep down, the real personality controlling him right now is exactly that. You could say Jax has gotten worse, but not quite in the way you might think. One more thing that backs this up is one of the final scenes from this adventure.
Oh look, Gangle's up to bat. How do you think this is gonna go?
Would you stop trying to force her to act like you?
Oh yeah, I should force her to be happy all the time instead, right?
Well, it's better than turning her into some insensitive jerk who deflects everything.
Okay, let's, calm down a bit.
What? You're the one who said it's fine to be a jerk sometimes! Ugh. I'm sorry, Pomni.
No apologies for me? This is so sad. Huh? Oh cool, I'm not a vegan anymore.
Oh, hey! Wait, what are you...
Honestly, I still don't fully get what's up with Jax's behavior. It kinda looked like he was straight up rabid or something, but whatever. At the very end, we got this unexpectedly wholesome scene that really made it feel like Jax and Pomni actually did become friends. I'm super curious to hear your take on the question I asked at the start. Did Jax actually get worse or not? Personally, I'd say yeah. Jax definitely got a little worse, but more in the sense that his mental state seems even more unstable now. That was super clear in the scene where he was literally ready to rip Gangle apart over a harmless joke that everyone had voted for. There's a chance Pomni might be able to bring back that old version of Jax, the one he used to be when he was still friends with that character. And honestly, all we can do now is hope. Episode 5 gave us a lot of big moments, but one of the most surprising was the confirmation that Jax and Regatha are actually brother and sister. And if that sounds like some wild fan theory cooked up by shippers, just stick with this video, because the more you see, the more it starts to make sense. Rumors about a connection between these two have been around since the pilot, but most people brushed them off until Episode 5 dropped. And let's be real, we all saw one of Jax's biggest fears.
What is this? Why'd you do that? Can you get that thing away from me?
Are you afraid of corn?
No.
At first I thought Jax choosing corn as his biggest fear was just some weird joke, and honestly it did seem like that for a long time. But then Goose explained it on Tumblr. Turns out Jax is scared of corn because it reminds him of some farm. Now that alone didn't mean much, at least not until we ended up in the bar and Regatha started talking.
I was born into a fairly wealthy family. We had a large property with horses and chickens, and my mother, my mother was a lot. I worked in real estate for a bit until I ended up here. I'm sure she doesn't miss me. I certainly don't miss the yelling, and braiding, and guilt tripping, and the... Yeah, just kind of a farm girl. Nothing too out of the ordinary.
And this is where things get real, because we notice something that's just too obvious to ignore. Regatha said she used to live on a big farm, while Jax is scared of corn because it reminds him of a farm. You could call that a coincidence, sure, but then why did Jax react so genuinely to Regatha's story about her real life? It felt like he was remembering not just his own past, but hers too. But there's one part of her monologue that most people missed, and it's crazy important. I'm talking about Regatha's mom, who's very likely also Jax's mom. From what we learned, she was super strict and didn't really care much about how her kids felt. That alone could explain a lot about how both Regatha and Jax act. Think back to Episode 5, it's immediately obvious how much Regatha gets thrown off by anything that doesn't fit the rules.
What the frick?
Huh? Check this out. You're out, dumb.
Damn it!
It's pretty clear that their mom's harsh parenting messed Regatha up in a big way. She turned into someone who's way too obedient, constantly puts insane pressure on herself, and worst of all, she's always trying to find something positive even when there's literally nothing good there at all.
Well, that sure could have gone better. But I'm sure the next adventure will be less... what? Hey, Pomni! Remember when Kaufmo smashed me against the walls and I got all jumbled up? All things considered, that was pretty funny, right?
No, not really.
Oh, yeah, no. Sorry, that was probably pretty traumatic for you.
And that's exactly what annoys Jax, because even though they grew up in the same house, he sees all of this in a completely different way. Remember how I kept saying that the evil versions of the characters are like mirrors of their real emotions? Evil Jax is this super anxious, insecure guy, and honestly that's probably who he really is. Deep down he just hides it behind all the sarcasm and attitude. Like take that high school adventure for example.
What is this? I don't like this.
Oh, can it? At least we finally have one that's by someone else.
Yeah, there's nothing more fun than being back in school.
Sure, you could say he was just trying to act cool like school's lame, and guys like him don't need it. But what if the truth is, he didn't want to take part, because in real life, he was actually a total loser at school, and being in that kind of environment just makes him feel super uncomfortable. Just realized I never actually explained why Jax is scared of corn. We don't know the full truth yet, but judging by how intense his reaction was, this plant clearly ties to some seriously traumatic experience. So maybe his mom used corn as some twisted form of punishment, like beating him with cobs or forcing him to eat a crazy amount of them whenever he disobeyed. And at this point, we can pretty confidently say Jax and Regatha are actual siblings, but that's just the beginning. Just think back to how they act around each other throughout Episode 5.
Does she think hanging out with Zubul is gonna magically fix that?
Maybe she just doesn't want to hang out with someone who's mean to her all the time.
She likes when I'm mean to her, though. Hey, I ain't forcing anything on you.
And then you just act like you never do anything wrong and everybody loves you, when in reality you just fuck everything up for everyone else!
It's pretty clear that Regatha reacts to Jax way differently than she does to anyone else, and it makes sense. They grew up in the same environment, had the same strict upbringing, but while Jax broke out of that box and turned all that childhood trauma into harsh, even cruel behavior, Raggy stayed stuck inside her own mental cage. She never moved past those old patterns, so seeing Jax act out and be so different totally throws her off. That's why we see her either snapping at him or showing these weirdly intense emotions when it comes to Jax.
Not anymore. Oh, wait, no. I'm sorry. I wasn't talking about that. That wasn't meant to be.
No apologies for me? This is so sad.
I'm sorry, Jax, for bringing up that thing earlier.
We also know Regatha worked in real estate, and I mentioned before that characters get into the digital circus through some abandoned building that probably houses servers, computers, and headsets acting as gateways. Since real estate agents sometimes check out old, abandoned places for reconstruction and resale, Regatha could have found this spot and told Jax about it, and maybe he suggested they see what happens if they jump into the game. If that sounds weird, just remember Kinger and his wife, who also ended up in the digital circus together. Let's also remember Jax's friend, who's no longer in the digital circus. That means after they got trapped in this cursed game, Jax managed to find a friend while Regatha basically wandered alone most of the time. Sure, she might have talked to someone here and there, but deep down, she was lonely, and it's pretty likely she played a part in Ribbit turning into an abstracted monster. They both ended up in the circus, and Jax was basically the only close person Regatha had, but he actually ditched her for his new friend. And if you think back to that scene...
Remember when you got high at McDonald's and told Gangle to kill herself? No, that was funny.
What? I did not say that. I think. No.
It's clear right away Raggy never said anything like that. Sure, she told Gangle some pretty harsh stuff, but nothing like that. So it's very likely those words were meant for Ribbit, and after that, he probably started doubting himself and all that, which eventually led to him turning into a monster. Maybe that's why we see tears in her eyes when she apologized to Jax for bringing up Ribbit. So, if we sum up episode 5 through the lens of Jax and Regatha being siblings, I'm more than sure that everything about how they interact and their backstories in the real world is basically screaming it. But like I said before, this isn't just something new. There were plenty of hints dropped in earlier episodes too. Like, remember that scene from episode 3?
You know how men are. Always having the silliest priorities.
Don't I know it?
Just pay attention to how warmly Regatha says those words. Despite everything that's happened between them in past episodes and probably even in real life, she still clearly cares about Jax. No matter what, she tries to support him and kinda guide her younger brother through life, like in this moment right here.
I'm so unbelievably disappointed right now.
Well, maybe there'll be blood, death, and violence in the next adventure.
Or like when she opened up under the effect of that stupid sauce.
Yo, Jax. I hate you, but I don't want you to hate me. Is that weird?
You're drunk or something.
Oh yeah.
And there's a bunch more scenes like that, which I already talked about in one of my older videos. Did we finally get the truth about how people end up in the digital circus? What's the real connection between Pomni and Ribbit? All of this and so much more was hidden throughout episode 5, and today we're breaking down every secret detail and reference that'll completely change the way you see the digital circus. We'll start with the smaller Easter eggs, like this teapot right here. At first glance, it might seem random, but it's actually a giant nod to the entire 3D animation community. That's because it's a reference to the Utah teapot, a legendary model that's basically become an inside joke and iconic symbol in the world of 3D animation. Now let's move on and listen closely to Kane's opening speech.
Welcome back, my candy hearts and paper flowers!
If you caught it, the line, "Hello my candy hearts and paper flowers," wasn't just some random quirky intro. It's actually a direct reference to Raggedy Ann and Andy musical adventure. And what makes that even more interesting is that, right as Kane says it, the only character left in the shot is Regatha. Well, aside from Pomni, but let's be honest, given her state at that point, she barely counts. Now, if we take a second to look back at Kane's possible adventure options.
So I've got an adventure where you all tour my amazing magic chocolate factory and get killed off one by one from OSHA violations. One where a sentient cardiovascular system goes to war against the United States military. And one where you have to survive in a post-apocalyptic nuclear wasteland with a telepathic talking dog who's mean to you the whole time. What do you think?
It's pretty easy to spot that one of them is a clear nod to Willy Wonka's chocolate factory. And as for the second one, there's a solid theory floating around that it references I have no mouth and I must scream, which, fun fact, is basically one of the core inspirations behind the entire concept of the digital circus. And while we're still on this scene, let's rewind and take a look at another line of dialogue that ties into all of this.
Just keep your adventures open at all times and let us do whatever we want when we want.
Are you hearing this, Bubble? The Toy Box character wants us to leave the other intelligent AIs to run for a prolonged period of time.
Disgusting!
This is where things get a lot more interesting because technically, Zubul actually came up with a pretty solid idea, and Kane shot it down instantly. But why? There are two possible explanations here. First off, let's not forget how Gummy Goo ended up in the digital circus. If multiple access points were opened, it's almost guaranteed that some kind of rogue AI would eventually slip into the circus grounds, causing total chaos and destabilizing the entire system. And second, it's very possible that the digital circus just isn't powerful enough to handle multiple adventures running at the same time. Fun fact, this whole scene is also a subtle nod to I have no mouth and I must scream. Now, while Poacher's Paradise didn't give us much in terms of hidden details, things started getting way more interesting once we got to the White House adventure. Inside Pomni's office, we see tons of paintings, one with a dog, one featuring Jax, one showing an abstracted monster, and even one with Zubul. Oh, and one of the books on her desk actually references Pomni's so-called original name from pilot episode. And this is exactly where things start to get really wild.
Oi, mate! I'm an Australian extremist, and I've come to detonate this bomb that'll release all the world's deadliest spiders into... Did I pick a bad time?
I think a lot of you figured out why Jax had that kind of reaction and why that one line hit so hard after that moment. Of course, it's a direct reference to the infamous Clinton-Lewinsky scandal. And hey, if you're curious, feel free to look up the details online, but we're here to talk about the digital circus. During the anime-style adventure, you can spot that every character has their own locker, another callback to the Utah Teapot, a nod to Kane, and even a reference to the Gaslight District. On top of that, we saw a hidden Easter egg featuring Mel on the wall during the scene where Jax is talking to Pomni, and right after that, Pomni brings up that scene from episode 2. During the stargazing moment, the big takeaway was the reveal that Jax once had a friend who ended up becoming an abstracted monster, though let's be real, that part's already pretty obvious to most viewers. We also finally got a close-up of the Ferris wheel, and fun fact, the moon is voiced by none other than Gooseworx herself. But what's even more interesting is this next part.
Also, she's dumb and she looks weird.
Think we all look weird.
Excuse you, this is what peak male performance looks like. My ears and tail are kind of the pinnacle of masculinity.
You don't have a tail.
What are you talking about? Yes, I do. What the? Where's my tail? How long have I not had my tail?
I have never seen you with a tail.
Jax was more than convinced he had a tail, a throwback to his original design. Even though there aren't many images or concept arts of Jax with a tail online, I did manage to find one official concept art showing Jax rocking that very tail. But honestly, that's not even the craziest thing the developers hid in episode 5. After the stargazing scene, the characters head into an intermission, and amid all the chaos, we get shots of Zubul, Pomni, and Jax posing like they're on early 2000s music album covers. And of course we can't skip the scene where Jax is sprinting full speed toward a door marked with a ribbit. It's pretty easy to guess he turned into an abstracted monster, but check out how he's running specifically toward that door. If you were paying close attention, you probably noticed the first door had Kaufmo's image on it, meaning this event happens after Kaufmo's funeral. And if we remember that scene, it's quite likely that Jax ran off to visit his old friend right after the events of episode 2. It's also pretty obvious that this is the very character Gooseworx named Ribbit, and if you look at him for more than 2 seconds, it becomes clear he's a frog. Now remember that earlier shot where Pomni is sitting as a frog? What's even funnier is that Pomni was originally supposed to be a frog too, but ended up becoming the jester because of Jax. I'll explain all of that a bit later, but for now, let's switch scenes to the bar where Pomni shared a pretty interesting story.
I was an accountant for a supermarket chain.
A supermarket? How'd you end up here?
Well, I sometimes got bored of things, and I would seek out mild thrills, like exploring abandoned buildings, you know.
I don't think many people really caught this story, especially the part where Pomni mentioned exploring abandoned buildings. It might have slipped past most, but the sharpest viewers noticed she said this right after Jax asked how she ended up in the digital circus. And that's where things get both kind of creepy and insanely intriguing, especially if you pay close attention to what the characters say next.
I sometimes did that. I wouldn't record it, though. Here's your Cosmo.
Thanks. I worked in real estate for a bit until I ended up here. I'm sure she doesn't miss me.
Keep in mind, it's been confirmed that Pomni and Zubul explored abandoned buildings, while Ragatha worked at a real estate agency. It makes perfect sense that she could have entered one of those buildings to evaluate it for renovation and resale. So that's already 3 characters connected to an abandoned building, which likely plays a big role in how they all ended up in the digital circus. There's a strong possibility that inside this abandoned building, there's some kind of server, maybe the one linked to that headset, which transfers people's consciousness into the digital circus. And if the building is truly abandoned, chances are none of them are alive anymore in the real world. Gotta admit, that's pretty damn intriguing. But hey, let's switch to something less dark. Everyone remembers Jax's story, right?
I thought you'd never ask. Well, after my lung cancer diagnosis, me and my junkie associate from a chemistry class I used to teach
I figured. How about you, Gangle?
Hey, I wasn't done.
If you're gonna make shit up, at least be creative about it. I know what you're referencing.
Was that a reference to something?
And if, like Ragatha, you still didn't catch what that was referencing, I gotta say, I'm kinda jealous, because you haven't watched Breaking Bad yet. Jax was basically telling his story from Walter White's point of view. Oh, and just a fun fact, the bar's called Radical. Now, let's head over to the last adventure, the stadium where Kinger immediately dropped some knowledge.
I may not know what's going on, or who is going on, or when is going on, or why is going on, but I do know where is going on, and it's out on that field.
His speech is a nod to the classic Abbott and Costello sketch, Who's on First? But the real fun starts later. Before that, let's quickly run through some of the smaller Easter eggs. We spot C and A again, which most likely stands for Cain and Albert, not Cain and Abel, like some thought at first. There's an ad for some burger joint, and since we know Glitch is based in Australia, that's probably a shout out to the local franchise Hungry Jack's, which is basically Burger King down under. We also get another reference to Gummigoo, plus nods to Spudsies and even Kaufmo, but the real gem is hidden in this very scene.
She's cool. Wait, what's that?
The most obvious thing I noticed is that Gangle called for a vote right after Jax said that evil Pomni is cool. I'm not trying to read too much into it, but to me that moment felt pretty strange, especially seeing how Gangle's expression changed. Also, I caught that Pomni didn't vote for Jax to turn into a maid, which is a nod to an old concept art. Even cooler, Jax's eyes as a maid match exactly what we saw in those early concept sketches. That probably means Jax was originally meant to be human, while Pomni was supposed to be an animal, but something went sideways. Oh. And of course, that whole scene is a perfect throwback to the classic Cats and Cucumbers meme. We saw Zubul and Gangle as animals. Got a deeper look into evil Ragatha's emotions, but what really caught my eye was this image. Yeah, the one that shows Ribbit. Now, if you've somehow been living under a rock this whole time, Ribbit is Jax's best and apparently only friend who turned into an abstracted monster not long before Kaufmo did. And for some reason, I'm more than sure this character might actually show up in the next episode, maybe as an Easter egg, an NPC, or even a full-on character just for that episode, and I'm about to prove why that's totally possible. We all remember that episode 5 was originally supposed to be focused on Ragatha, then Gooseworx surprised us by saying it would be equally split between Jax and Ragatha, but based on what we actually saw, I can confidently say episode 5 turned out to be Ragatha's episode. Sure, we learned a few secrets about Jax and got a tiny glimpse into who he is beneath the surface, but the main storyline was definitely all about Ragatha, which means episode 6, just like it was originally planned, is going to be way more focused on our favorite rabbit. And if the spotlight's on Jax, then the events are obviously going to revolve around him too. And since Ribbit played such a major role in his life, not showing him, or at least not bringing him up in episode 6, would honestly feel like a crime. And if we go back to that very image, the first thing that struck me as odd was the fact that Gooseworx specifically highlighted it. If you take a closer look at the drawing itself, you'll instantly notice how much Ribbit actually resembles Jax. Just look at how Goose portrayed his expression. It's crazy how similar it is to the kinds of emotions we've seen on Jax's face in so many different moments. Now think about this. If the creators had no plans to show this character again, then why go out of their way to design him with that much detail and then even officially confirm who he is? If he was just going to stay a piece of backstory, there'd be no point in giving him that kind of spotlight, especially since Goose isn't really into pushing fan theories or hyping stuff just for attention. Remember that old leak of Jax in the maid outfit? That thing's been floating around for over a year if I'm not mistaken, and while everyone thought it was a joke back then, now we've seen it's actually canon, which means it's totally possible Ribbit might appear in the next episode too, considering that official art and everything I just laid out. As always, I'm waiting for your thoughts in the comments, but let's keep going. By now you've probably realized that Ribbit has to show up in episode 6, and the only question left is in what form we'll actually see him. There's a solid chance that Ribbit might actually be that strange mannequin we've seen popping up in multiple episodes. At first it didn't seem like much, but after the final scene in episode 5, it's starting to look like this mannequin could play a pretty big role in the digital circus. Maybe that's Dr. Football, or maybe it is Ribbit. His consciousness transferred out of the abstracted form and into the mannequin's body. After all, we know Kane has the power to manipulate the very minds of the circus residents, so it's totally possible he brought Ribbit back to sanity. But I think this whole theory deserves its own deep dive. For now, let's keep going with the early scenes and leaks from episode 6. Right after episode 5 dropped, we got that teaser showing Regatha sitting alone. And seriously, am I the only one seeing that same mannequin in the background? Going back to that teaser, it's super clear this is the very next moment after Regatha walked off screen, so it's probably not some random time skip or separate flashback. It really feels like this is a direct continuation of episode 5. Sure, some might argue that it takes place in between episodes 5 and 6, but I've got reasons to believe that episodes 5 and 6 are actually one massive connected story, with the events flowing straight into each other without a single break. Everyone's already seen that so-called leak that says episodes 5 and 6 are split between Jax and Regatha, and yeah, we've already talked about that today. But let's not forget the theory that these two characters are actually connected, so their stories are unfolding side by side. Episode 5 leaned more into Raggy's perspective, and episode 6 is shaping up to focus more on Jax. So in that case, episodes 5 and 6 are really just one huge story that got split in half, but still follows one continuous plot line. That's why the teaser we saw works as both the ending of episode 5 and the beginning of episode 6. It makes perfect sense, especially if you look at Regatha's mental state by the end of episode 5. She's clearly falling apart, and judging by that final scene, she's dangerously close to turning into an abstracted monster. I think that's exactly how episode 6 is going to kick off as a straight continuation of episode 5. We'll probably dive a bit deeper into Raggy's storyline first, and then it'll all spiral into the chaos Gooseworx teased way back in December. And all that chaos? Most likely tied to Jax. Which honestly makes you question everything we saw about him in episode 5, like what if none of it was genuine? What if this dude's actually trying to use Pomni for something? That's a whole other theory we'll definitely need to talk about soon, but for now I'm betting it's going to start with a pretty emotional scene. Regatha, totally on the edge, maybe even breaking down, and maybe, just maybe, Pomni shows up and they have a serious talk.